got your idea.
Yeah.
And the next thing now is to decide who your participants are going to be. So can you explain how that worked, what you did, who they were?
Well, I knew that I didn't want to only talk to students, I wanted to talk to staff. So the participants were from a university where entrepreneurship was taught as part of the curriculum outside a business school.
Right.
And so the participants were staff members who taught on those modules, and also undergraduate female students who were being taught on those modules. I knew that I didn't want to look at business schools, and I had no preconceived idea about which disciplines or which areas I'd look at. What I did was I spoke to staff, I spoke to sort of the gatekeepers, I spoke to the people who were also involved in informal support in business units, and they would say, oh well, this course does that and this course does a module in that. So I sort of originally got a feel for where it was being taught outside the business school, and then I sort of had to find a way of getting in contact with staff and talking to them about it, and figuring out how to then get access to their students. And that was quite a difficult process, really, actually getting access to the students, because my original idea, what would have been the ideal thing to do, would have been for me to have just a list of the students that I could then randomly choose people to approach to participate. But I got embroiled in all sorts of data protection issues, and no, we can't give you that information. And so I wanted to have, it was like a randomised selection, and I tried all different ways of doing that, and in the end I just couldn't get hold of the information. So then I approached staff who then started to say, oh yeah, well, I'll find some really good students for you to work with. And then I thought, no, that's not going to work, because you mustn't know who I'm actually talking to, and you saying I want some really good, I'll give you some really good students. Well, I want to like a representative. I want to try and have a cross section of people, not ones that have been handpicked because they're going to say particular things about your course. So again, I couldn't do it that way. So in the end, I sort of talked it through with my supervisor, and she suggested that what I did was I went into and they're massive lectures, the really big groups of students. There'd be like over 100 students in there, and I sort of went up and I talked a little about what I was doing. And what I did is I put post-it notes on every single desk in there. I put post-it notes, and I just said, if you're interested in getting involved, just put your email on there. So no, and I didn't collect them up until the end, so nobody need know who. Yeah. The teacher couldn't keep track of who was writing it down. So I hope that was a way of keeping it anonymous. And also I didn't specify that I was only going to interview female students, but I did say, you know, I'm not going to be getting in contact with all of you because I'm going to sort of pick random. I'm going to sort of pick out people, because I don't need to interview hundreds of students. So I made it clear that if you didn't get in contact with me, it would be because I hadn't sort of picked you out of, you know, didn't pick your name out of the hat to do the actual interviews. So because I didn't want the teachers to know that I didn't want anyone to start thinking, well, I wonder who they're talking to. And I also made a point of talking to final year students as well, not only because they're at that point where they're thinking about how they're going to put into action what they've learned at university, which may be going and setting up a business, but they were also I was hoping they were going to be more reflective about this sort of this sort of bridge between study and work and the choices they might have. I know I could bring in habitus and look at capital, about what they felt they could bring and what they had to take into the world of work and employment. And also another thing was so that by the time I'd written it up and published my PhD, they'd have all left. So even if the teachers went, oh, you know, they thought they knew it, there'd be no problems, the students wouldn't be disadvantaged in any way. So that was how I went about choosing, or sort of getting access to students and to the staff as well.
And how many participants did you end up with?
I worked with 7 staff and I worked with 14 students.
And was that less or more than you expected?
That was less. I think it's sort of in qualitative research, there's a worry that you're not going to have enough participants, but I think once you start once you start working with the producing the data, you sort of realise, actually, I'm glad I didn't go for 30 students and 20 staff members. It's a choice. You either get a little bit of data about a lot of people, or you get a lot of data about a lesser group of people. And for what I was looking at, which is quite sort of complex, and you needed to actually learn a lot about the people and learn a lot about the situation they were in, that was really the only way to do it justice, I felt, to sort of really do a lot of in-depth work. Because then I'm hoping that's going to lead to me maybe looking at research with bigger groups, but I would already have framed some of the ideas and some of the things to look at. So it's worrying. It's worrying as a researcher that you haven't got enough people. But I've read research where there's been one participant and it's been absolutely brilliant. And I've gotten a lot out of it. And theoretically, it's been very robust as well. And so I'm quite glad it ended up with less.